Well, welcome to a special Thursday edition of the Status Chat. Now, I'm doing this a little bit earlier because we're trying some things. I find that my historic working on Friday, I often wait on stuff that shows up later in the day, and by the time I get to that, get it set up and produce the show, that it posts fairly late, and that can be a problem for viewership and for getting the information out. So today it is the 17th of October 2024. I am Delbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is your Friday Status Chat on Thursday. And I'm also making some changes to see if I can't improve the quality of the video through the zoom ins and that sort of thing by having a lossless file, which is huge, and then I'll have to modify that, and that can take some time, stress the hardware. We've got a new machine being built, which should be a few months out, but we're just going to see if we can't improve how it looks. So with that said, let's get to it. If you like this content, please go to CallDelToSell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you when each Friday's blog has been uploaded. Thank you. Well, where we are today is we're going to be looking forward. We're going to try to read some tea leaves to see what's going on, because as you know, and this is a recap for you regular viewers, we were expecting a third quarter 24 reduction in the Fed rates since December of last year, despite all of the happy horse stuff and the people on the Facebook and the other places that just want to feed you happiness and joy so that you do a transaction. I like to be a little bit more practical, a little bit more, I feel, a little bit more honest, because half a truth is still a whole lie. So we want to tell both sides of the story. We want to see both sides of a coin, the obverse and the reverse. So that's what I try to do. So we have this going on. Let's look at what came out today. All right, let's start with this one from Y Charts. We have Y Charts right here. They are the source. You'll have the links to all of these things that I use in the description of the Status Chat over on the YouTube page where you find this production, assuming that I can modify such a large file with my software. So let's zoom in on that. What do we see? We see the U.S. retail sales report is 17.96 billion for September. Well, there it is, and we can see it's definitely going up. Now, is that something we wouldn't have expected? No, I don't think so, because quite honestly, we looked at that double bump downwards in the rate, which is freeing up some money for some businesses. And when we looked at that surprise double hit, it was coming on the heels of some bad labor numbers, what looked like they were, and it was at the first sign of a decline that people freaked out, who were desperately screaming that they wanted to get their commercial loans redone and what have you, and we have to have an emergency meeting. Remember, I told you that would be a terrible thing to do because that's a sign of panic in the Fed, and that going ahead of projected is also a bad sign, because it seems that the Fed will always drop the rates to spur the economy when the economy is faltering and dying. And so if we go twice what we expect, that would be terrible and sign of recession. And yet the general consensus was among people who pay attention that this was a political move from the Fed with the election coming. And that itself resulted in the stock market still doing quite well, because everybody basically said, yes, we got an extra quarter point, but we really didn't need it, and we're not sliding off into unemployment problems, because we had the one little report and it got better next, but yet pressure bear, and they dropped the rate. So what do we expect to happen when we drop the Fed rates to spur the economy? We would expect to see an increase in activity, which we have seen. So this is an indication to me that perhaps perhaps we really in fact did not need that double hit. Some of the voices, if I remember correctly, were saying amongst the Fed committee, we may even want to raise the rate. Maybe there was one vote for raising the rate or keeping it zero. Others were saying, well, we can do it for the planned quarter point, but the shouting got loud in the room and apparently they went 50 basis points. So if we got double points last time, will we get a cut this time? What does the tea leaves sort of tell us? That's what we're looking at today. A Thursday, a special Thursday where we're looking at the equipment to see if we can't make this a little bit better. Well, let's look at something else. Let's look at this BLS, import-export price indices. And this came out today, so this is fresh off the press. We could have done this on Friday, but we're doing it today because it's available today. And we can see that the red line represents all imports, and we can see that that's going down a little bit. So we can see that we have some price drop on imports. Now remember, this is import and export, so let's look at the news release right here. Full screen it. U.S. import prices decreased 0.4% in September. So that's kind of going to give us an idea. Yeah, we are kind of holding on inflation in one tiny little area, which would be imports. Export prices drop even further. Now, prices for U.S. imports declined 0.4%. I think that exceeded what we were seeing in the swing of inflation, so that's a good news right there in September. After decreasing 0.2% in August, we're accelerating. The U.S. export prices fell 0.7% in September, following a 0.9% drop the previous month. So we're actually gaining domestically. Do you see that? Because we did fall, but we decreased the speed at which we fell by 0.2%. So that's good for our domestic production that goes out of the country for our exports, which is the smaller part of the economy. But we see that the prices for imports decline faster. So what that's giving us, in my mind, is it's showing us that the world stage, the world economy, particularly China, they're just a mess. That's what happens when you have a central authority trying to run everybody's businesses. It just doesn't work. They're having a very, very tough time. You can look that up on your own, but we see that we're a beneficiary if our import prices come down a little bit, and we know that that is a bulk of our manufactured goods do come into the United States, especially simple stuff. Things like towel racks and toilet paper holders and small items, radios, small electronic items. They tend to be imported versus some of the higher tech stuff, the stuff that may have a tariff or protectionism put on it, or the shipping of the entire good is very expensive because it's a bulky item. Many things do it, but we're not making enough stuff domestically. So we saw that coming down. Well, let's pick the next thing, because I think that's a good sign. I want some more economic encouragement going on right now so I can try to figure out what the heck is likely to happen the next meeting. And we see this is the, let me roll, is that all the way up at the top? Yes, it is. This is from Mortgage News Daily. It is the NAHB Builder Confidence, and this, of course, we could have gone to the Association of Home Builders and pull this, but it's just convenient at one of our favorite sites. And what do we see this last little change? Well, someone, perhaps the home builders, are seeing grounds for improvement. Now, maybe that's because they saw the rates tip down. Maybe it's just because we're going to potentially get out of this disastrous thought processes we've had to deal with over the last 3.5 years. But it looks like we're getting a little bit more optimistic. Remember, and this is really important, I can't stress this enough, it is a bad day when the Fed raises the cost of money, the Fed rate, and it's an even worse day when the Fed drops the cost of money, because they drop the cost of money to combat employment problems. They raise it to combat inflation, and neither one of those two things is good for us as an economy. We want very little volatility. We want things to give us confidence that the immediate future is not going to snap off the edge of the earth. like the 4-ship that Christopher Columbus used. You know, we had the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Well, they had the Jose, but the Jose sailed off the edge of the earth because, you know, Earth was flat. Earth was flat. So we don't want our economy to go off the corner either. So let's look back at this, and we see that it is in fact somebody, for some reason, the home builders are more optimistic, and significantly so, to 51 from a 37, right? So that's good news. Well, let's look at something else. Are you ready? We're going to look at a news release from the Department of Labor as far as employment goes. It was also out today, October the 17th. So I've got plenty of bullets for my gun for a Thursday report. It says unemployment insurance weekly claims seasonally adjusted, because we do expect some outside jobs to start tailing off a little bit as we cool down and as we shift from some of our outdoor activities to retail activities. It says here, in the week of October 12th, the advanced figures for seasonally adjusted initial claims was 241,000, a decrease of 19,000 from the previous week's revised level. Now, this may show that it gets revised later, and they may be pumping us with happy gas, but it is going in the right direction. It is at least signaling the information that the Fed is likely to use when the committee makes their decision next time. So if we're seeing whether or not it's real or it's slightly doctored to justify what they want to do, that's kind of what we want to try to look forward to. We want to kind of read the tea leaves and see what we think that they might possibly do, so that we're not surprised. We can be pleasantly surprised, but we don't want to be shocked and awed by any of this. So let's look back at this screen. We see the previous week's level was revised up. See, they're showing that they fixed it from the last happy gas, 2,000 from 258,000 to 260,000. But you see, where are we now? We're at 241 versus that 260. So that shows a positive decrease in initial claims. The 4-week moving average was 236, 250, which doesn't bother me too much. That may give us a little bit of a trend line, but it's not really going to give us idea of, are we actually turning the corner, and did we actually need that 50 basis points, and was that 50 basis points political? Because if it was politically based, then we should see an uptick in economic activity beyond that, which may affect inflation. But we just saw that the import prices were down a little bit, and our export prices were improved in a way that we looked at it. So let's look back at this, and we do see the red line is the moving average. That's the one that doesn't excite me as much. And if we look at the weekly initial claims, we do see a much more noisy line going up and down, up and down, up and down. So it doesn't necessarily mean we've reversed this trend, but we've certainly gone in the right direction. That looks like employment, and maybe that extra 50 basis points that we didn't really want or need actually helps people keep their jobs and not end up on the unemployment line. Now, the seasonally adjusted insured unemployment for October 7th to October 5, that's a year over year, shows that we're pretty well much flat. We've maybe gotten a little bit higher in the last 6 months or so. These are your months down here: October, November, December, January, February. You're getting the idea. And so really, the unemployment for the insured portion is not really significantly changed, is it? Now, what do we got going up next? Well, let's look at 2 manufacturing indices also out today, or I think one of them may have been out yesterday, but they're important to look at. So we're going to look at them. They are of a different region than we are here in the 6th district. So we're going to look at this. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, serving the 2nd district. And I messed up. I should have started with my picture in the corner and then did the big picture, but we're here nonetheless. Empire State Manufacturing Survey. Yes, Empire State in New York, conducted by the Federal Bank of New York, 2nd District. And what does it say? I've already got this pre-zoomed in for your convenience, trying to make this where you can see better even on the smaller screen. Notice the red says that this is the expected and the blue is the current, and of course the grays are the recession. I want to draw attention to this. You see where the recession hits, we do tend to drop off on manufacturing, and before we actually emerge from a recession, we actually start remanufacturing. We start cranking things up because they get leading information, leading data, whereas the recession is generally a lagging indicator and we get it after fact. We see the same thing here for 2020. Let me zoom that back out just a little bit so that we can see what we've got going on in the years. 2005, remember the big 2008 issue that we had where the housing market crashed. 2020, that's where we had the unconstitutional lockdowns and the big grab for power. We saw that affected our economy, and we printed a bunch of money that we're now paying for in the form of inflation. So that's Empire State, 2nd District. Let's look at this one right here, which will be from the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia, and we're going to check that out in today's report right now. All right, I didn't forget to do myself in the little corner. This is Federal Reserve Bank, Philadelphia. This is, I think, the 3rd district, if I remember correct. Philly is the 3rd, somewhere in, yes, there it is. The Manufacturing Business Outlook Survey is a monthly survey of manufacturers in the 3rd Federal Reserve District. Participants indicate the direction of change in overall business activity and unfilled orders, shipment, inventories, delivery times, prices paid, prices received. The survey has been conducted since 1968. All right. Now what we want to look at here is we have to kind of page through this just a tad. We're going to look at October because we said this was monthly. And we want to remember that this is some of the information that is summarized in what we call the Beige Book. And it's been a couple months, been a minute since we looked at the Beige Book, which is usually published just ahead of the Fed meeting that summarizes this, so it makes it a lot easier for us common folk to see what the heck is going on. So let's get back to it. October 2024 Manufacturing Business Outlook. Note the survey responses were collected from October 7th to 14th, so a week ago. So we're good to go. 17th is today, so it came out 3 days. They took them 3 days to produce this. Manufacturing activity for the region expanded overall, according to the firms responding to the October Manufacturing Business Outlook Survey. They expanded overall. The survey's indicators for the current general activity for new order shipments all rose, with the latter returning to positive territory this month. The employment index declined and suggested most steady employment conditions. Both price indices edged down but continue to indicate overall increases in prices. So we've got a little bit of inflation coming into this. Expectations for growth over the next 6 months were widespread this month as most future indicators rose. So remember, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's bad when they raise rates, it's bad when they drop rates, and it's even worse if they're moving a direction when they don't have the data to justify that decision. However, the stock market liked the 50 basis points. The bond market, particularly in mortgage-based security, that side of it actually went back up because they were like, this ain't making sense here, guys. So it went up, and we had our usual suspects saying, oh, it's what we expected to do. No, we didn't. When we drop the cost of money through the Fed rates, we expect everything to start to kind of go down in accordance with that, including unemployment. But it didn't. It went up because it was the wrong move. Another reason it signaled it was the wrong move to make, but the Fed made it. But I think the stock market looked at it as, well, that at least means we're not entering a recession anytime soon. So here we have chart 1, current and future activity in the indices, January 9th to October 24. All right, so this is spreading quite a while. Give us a little bit of history to find out kind of where normal looks like it is, and then our post-printing press frenzy. We see that we jumped up a little higher than we should have, and then we had to adjust down negative to kind of compensate. We're kind of returning to a normal period here. So that is, I think, a good idea. Black obviously is future. Gold there, or brown, if it looks like on your monitor, is the current activity, and we do see that we're going up. So that does look pretty good for the 3rd district. Now if we come down here to current prices paid and prices received, we see that the prices paid came down. So that's a good sign for controlling inflation. And the prices received, they also came down. So that cuts into income, but we know the stock markets are doing pretty well. Firms anticipate higher capital expenditures next year. In this month's special question, manufacturers were asked about their plans for different categories of capital expenditures next year. Almost 52% of the firms indicated to increase total capital spending compared to 21% that expected to decrease capital. 27% expected it to stay the same. So what does that mean? Well, if a company is expecting to increase capital spending, they're investing, not locking the doors. So I think that's more positive to the more negative. So again, I'm happy to have good news, and I'm not afraid of bad news. I just want to know some facts. Give me some flipping facts. Okay, now let's get into the subject du jour. Okay, the subject du jour is, what do we think we're going to get? Possibly, can we start preparing ourselves for coal in our stocking, or oranges and socks, or are we actually going to get something fun in there, like a new cell phone or something? What's our economics look like it's going to happen? What is the mood? So let's slip right over here to Market Watch. Again, you'll have the link. This is the Waller skeptical of more big Fed rate cuts amid worries a strong economy could reignite inflation. Now, what did we say? What did the experts say? It's not just me, I'm no expert. But what did the experts say would happen if we dropped the rates before we controlled inflation? They said that would actually heat up the economy. We saw that from the Y charts, that we are spending more over the last period, so we're still spending. Okay, so we pumped some more money into the economy by dropping that rate down a little bit, and we just spent more stuff. So what is it going to have to do with next meeting? Well, Waller says that he thinks maybe the U.S. growth and strong jobs market means Fed shouldn't proceed with caution. Should proceed with caution. I about read that wrong. I'd have a job on radio if I could read the stuff wrong and get away with it. Now, it's just the headlines, about all we need. You'll have this. You can look at his opinion, but he is, in fact, part of the committee. Fed Governor Chris Waller said the economy is much stronger than previous thought, which was the reason for the double cut of 50 basis points. He made this remarks at an event at Stanford University on the left coast. Waller noted that the Fed and Wall Street have been fooled by reports over the summer that indicated that the economy was slowing. Remember, if we cut the rates when the economy is stalling and people are going to lose their jobs, because losing your job and not being able to pay your mortgage is a whole lot worse than inflation. But inflation isn't great either. I just bought a pork butt this week to do some barbecue, to have something to nosh on over the week, and the rate was $3 a pound, $2.99 a pound. Before this last ideological change and takeover, my pork butts were 99 cents a pound. Now, the CPI says food at home has gone up only like 20 some odd percent. That's a 300% price from where it was in 2020. And I think you and I both know that there underestimating what inflation actually is, and unfortunately that's what we got to pay. We don't get the ability to pay off the CPI. We got to pay what the prices are. We saw also in the export prices, we see that our imports are coming down, so that can help us a little bit, but not everything we have is imported. So let's look back at this. To remind you of how bad the markets viewed the July data, some Fed watchers were calling for an emergency Fed meeting to discuss a rate cut. Waller said the Fed stood pat in July and did not cut rates in September. But how many of our Facebook experts, our salesman type people were yelling at you, oh yeah, emergency cuts, do it now, get those rates down, get those rates down. It's almost like they have a loan, a commercial loan that's coming due and they can't pay the bill and they need to refinance that at a much lower rate. For most of the people that are either renting or buying or actually own a home, those rates don't affect us quite to the degree as people who want to sell a current home or buy a newly manufactured home, built home, that type of thing. So it affects a smaller segment, but everybody pays for inflation. So let's look at somebody else's opinion. All right, here we are. This one is also from Market Watch. This is Fed Daily. Fed Daily's open to skipping rate. Let's zoom in on that so I can highlight it. Fed's Daily is open to skipping a rate cut at one of the two remaining meetings this year. And where is this guy coming out of? San Francisco, from the left coast, which we would expect, because they're a blue city and much more in debt than their compared red city compatriots. We would kind of be a little bit surprised by that. But Mary Daly says, and she is a voting member, says that she's looking at maybe, I think she's actually fairly conservative if I remember her past statements. She says maybe we ought to skip at least one of the two remaining cuts because they did, in fact, double up according to plan the last time they finally made their pivot. Now we got one more thing we want to look at is I want to talk to you just a little bit about where the rates are today. What are the 30-year mortgage rates today? And for that, we have to bring up our old standby Mortgage News Daily. That's their rates, not my rates. Let's look at them. All right, Mortgage News Daily. I'm not going to do the little zoom out and then zoom in. We're just going to look at 30-year fixed rate mortgages from Mortgage News Daily. You know this. We see this on a regular basis. We have made significant progress from back here 2023 when the Fed just simply suggested that we would get a cut, potentially 3 cuts in 2024 starting in Q3. And what did the mortgage rates do even though the Fed did not change the cost of money? The mortgage rates fell because mortgage rates and Fed rates are not tied together. The biggest influence the Fed rate has is to suggest what the future holds. So we see that they came down without the Fed's cutting rates. And they began, as people got through their initial January Facebook experts, everything's going to be good and we're going to get some, and then they started to come back to reality. They rose back up to kind of a healthy level, but about a half a point from their peak. So that's a good thing. And now they've slowly come down as we were approaching that September cut. But what happened in September? You can see it as well as I can. Let's zoom in case you can't. Let's see. Rates went contrary to expectations. They shot up because we weren't cutting rates for the right reason. And if we cut rates and inflation goes higher, it may mean we have to actually pivot back to where we were before we pivoted. So the markets are going strong as far as the stock markets for the most part. They have held up. They simply are signaling they don't believe that the economy is going to collapse in recession in any time soon. I think maybe a recession is coming. It's got to be coming. We've had a long expansion. At some point, we correct after the 10-2 rates re-inverts so that we're above the line, we're uninverted, and we've done that. We've got a lag time before the recession hits, and they're saying we don't think it's right now. But look at this. Look what rates have done. They corrected up to about where the mortgage industry thinks it ought to be, and we've kind of flattened out. So I would almost believe that we might stay this way until we see whether or not the Fed makes another cut. If it gives it a miss and people believe that they double cut and so it wasn't really warranted, they may very well feel like, well, we already got an early Christmas present. We already got our next cut early. But we also see that 2 of the voting Fed members this week are giving us the expectation, they're telling the markets that probably we're not going to keep cutting and we're not going to crash the economy in fears of recession. And so I take that as a good thing. I really do. Now, can things be revised? Absolutely, you know that. Now, this file may be huge, and so I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to look at our weekly numbers after this important word that keeps me out of trouble with the real estate commission. We'll get to our numbers. We'll see how things actually changed kind of in our market. Hello, I'm Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, CallDelToSell. That's 1 L and Del, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout, and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. Let's look at what we did last week to see how much change we have in a week. Now, remind you that this is 1 day short because this is Thursday where I'm trying the different recording settings and then editing maybe a booger bear, but we do it because we care about you. We want to make your experience better, and I need you to tell me, does it help? So, tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling. This is all about, the algorithms work best when they are tickled by interaction. So I'm not going to tell anybody what you say, although it'll be in the comment below on the YouTube page where this status chat special Thursday edition lives. All right, 10/11 of 24 would be last week. We had 24,542 in the opportunities. That increased slightly. We had 4081 in the under contract still showing. That decreased slightly. And the integer ratio between those two numbers, what's available and what there is not really available, but kind of available, that went to 17%. Now I have to do my Bob Seger here and turn the page. That's an old people reference if you don't mind. All right, this week, 10/17 of 24, Thursday, we see that we have 24,198, which I believe is a slight decrease in opportunities, and the holding on to's still showing is 4179. So the under contract still showing went up a little bit. Yet not significantly, because it's still 17% the ratio at the integer level between those. So we appreciate you watching. Truly, if you don't mind and you're willing to do so, put a comment, and if you can like and subscribe, that also helps. If you can share me with somebody else so other people may want to see some positive news, at least it's turned up today, but also it accompanies the possibility that we may not get but one cut before the year is out. We may even not get any more cuts to the year is out. And you might need to explain to them why it's so desperately important that the Fed stay still so we can get used to it. We don't want to go it up because that's an indication that they're trying to slow the economy and control inflation's out of control, and we also don't want them to drop the bottom out because that's a sign that could be a sign of panic, freak out the equities market, it can freak out the bond market, and it can just be a bad day for everybody, either which way, whether you're trying to buy, sell, or just renting or living where you're at. So we just don't like the economic turmoil, and it looks like pretty soon we're either going to be able to take a breath or we're just going to have to go right back after 4 more years of this nonsense. So we appreciate you watching. Give us a thought. Give us a like. Throw us a little algorithmic action going on. We do appreciate you. Let me know if it's actually a better quality video. Thank you.